Hey guys, it's Ray here. Welcome to Interrupting Sports, the show devoted to inspiring positive change. This is Season 1, Episode 9, and today I'm excited to talk to you all about the 2020 Tokyo Summer Olympics. So for those of you who are back listening to the show, thank you so much for being a devoted fan and devoted listener. And for those of you who are new to the show, welcome. Hope you enjoy it. Please follow us at Interrupting Sports on Instagram to stay up to date with everything that goes on with this show. And thank you again for listening. So let's dive into what we're going to talk about today. So today we're going to talk about a bunch of topics from beach handball to weightlifting and ending off with boxing. So with that, let's waste no more time and dive into our first topic. So to start off this podcast, I actually want to take a moment here because I want to mention our fellow BCSS Olympians who are competing in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. So I mentioned in my first episode that I went to Bill Carruthers Secondary School, BCSS, in Markham. And for those of you who are unaware, it's a public sports high school. So everyone there is an athlete, and it's definitely a great place to be. And this year we have a number of athletes competing in the Olympics. So I wanted to just shout them out and wish them good luck for those who haven't competed yet, and also just give a round of applause for those who have. So starting off, we have Stephen Marf in men's volleyball. We have Nicholas Matviv, kayaking. Jade Riviere, women's soccer. Jeremy Hazen, men's table tennis. Joshua Liendo, men's swimming. And Andrew Coe, men's rugby. So congrats to all of you for making it thus far in your career. We're very proud of you as Canadians and as BCSS members. Thank you very much, and we're supporting you all the way. So good luck to you guys. So to start off this week's episode, I want to begin talking about Norway. And the reason I'm mentioning Norway is because I'm mostly concerned with Norway's women's beach handball team. Because what occurred, for those of you who are unaware, was most recently Norway's women's beach handball team faced a fine for not playing in bikini bottoms. Other than bikini bottoms, what they did was they played in shorts. So they were fined by the IOC for not participating in quote-unquote appropriate attire. Obviously, there's a lot of issues here. I probably don't even have to do a podcast about this because you guys are probably heads turning right now at this debacle, because honestly, it just astounds me at this point that this even occurred in the first place. So let's begin with why even wear shorts? What are they trying to do here? So we find many sports, volleyball, handball, you find the women's are wearing bikini bottoms. That's just a part of the sport. And the men's are wearing shorts, always. So when you think about it, just from that perspective, clearly playing the sport, an appropriate attire includes bikini bottoms and shorts, because men's wear short and women's wear bikini bottoms. But as we can see, we're crossing the line here when women dabble into the shorts category, because now that's not deemed appropriate attire, because apparently you can't play the sport as a female wearing shorts, when yes you can. And not even the fact that yes you can play sports wearing shorts as a female, but I don't know about you guys, but me personally, I would find that a lot more comfortable than playing in bikini bottoms. Then again, I'm not a beach handball player, I'm not a volleyball player, so can't really speak to that, but from what I'm just thinking of, what would be most comfortable to me is shorts. So the relevancy here is that two things. One, there's clearly sexism in athletic apparel, which we're going to dive into. And two, we clearly see some outdatedness when it comes to the rules and regulations of the IOC. So in terms of sexism in athletic apparel, when I first heard this headline, I read this headline, the first thing that I thought of was sexism in athletic apparel. And I thought of how in so many forms of athletic apparel, how there's a woman's style and a men's style. And how, in my opinion, oftentimes the woman's style is just not as practical as the men's style. But because of the figure or maybe the poise of a woman or that a woman is supposed to have, we find that we present the woman with more constricting material, figure, form, and it's tighter fitting. You often see things like that. And so what I really think of such as like the female cut shirt. Like female cut shirts are tighter, they're shorter sleeve, they don't go as long past the torso, and so they fit tighter. Versus the men's t-shirts that are fit a little looser, sleeves are longer, it's a bit more roomy. But I would say even on top of shirts, the biggest thing for me, and I think a lot of females will agree on this, are pants. The difference between male pants and female pants is drastic. The biggest thing, and every female will say this and will back me up on this for sure, no pockets. Pockets are either fake or just impractical in women's pants. But then there's guys who can lug an entire house and all of their belongings in their pants, but women's cannot. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because I want to just show that sort of parallel between how, for some reason, and what is this? Like, correct me or question me, and I challenge you to do so. It's, why do we find as a society that women should be constricted in their apparel? I'm not saying that they shouldn't be, but why is that the only option? Because maybe bikini bottoms for some players in beach handball, that's the perfect attire. But maybe for others, they prefer shorts. Either way, if you're wearing athletic clothing, you should be able to perform a sport. Then the second thing that I wanted to bring up was the datedness in the actions of the IOC finding them. I'm very, very stunned and at the same time not surprised at all. Because I know the IOC is very set in their regulations and they're very set about their ways. Like, things have been done for a very long time. They will continue to be done in that way. And I'm surprised because I'm surprised there wasn't maybe like a warning beforehand other than a fine. Like, if you guys, continue to act in such a way that goes against our rules and regulations, we'll be forced to fine you. I don't think that's right, but you know what I mean? Like, just having that sort of heads up, just out of consideration. But regardless, the reason I find this so outdated is because you really have to think of, why are they being fined? What is the problem? It's simple. There isn't one. There literally is not a reason for them to be fined. That's where I have a problem here, because you are telling people that something is wrong when in fact it is not. If anything, it could be helping them. But regardless, the point is that it's not wrong. And what I hate about this is these professional athletes and these athletes of this stature, especially the Olympics, so many young females and other athletes and kids, like, they all look up to Olympians. And so when you're seeing things like, I can't wear shorts, I can't do this, and you're that sort of negative turning down things away, and you're changing that perception in children's mind, you're limiting possibilities for them. And that's what puts them in a box and doesn't allow them to, one, express who they are and explore their true selves. So that is one thing that really bothers me about this. It's not the fact that there's a fine. It's the fact that what that message is showing to other people and what that's going to do for the next generation. Now, the second topic I wanted to talk about today, it's a little bit on the flip side when it comes to rules and regulations of the IOC, just from a different perspective. Again, we still see the IOC in continuing to follow their rules and regulations. However, we're actually seeing this in work in favor of promoting equity, diversity, and inclusion. The perfect example of this is Laurel Hubbard. Laurel Hubbard is the first transgender Olympian ever, and she's competing in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. Laurel Hubbard is from New Zealand. She's a weightlifter. She's in the super heavyweight category this year. And she was eligible to compete as a female, as the IOC claimed that she qualifies because the rules do apply to her, and that essentially means she fits all the criteria of a female, and therefore she's eligible. However, the point that I wanted to mention here is the stance that the IOC has is very interesting. It's not sort of a we embrace diversity and inclusion, welcome all kind of mantra that you see many companies having right now. Their kind of mantra is we can't change rules during ongoing competitions. So that gets you to think, okay, so if you could change the rules, would you? So that Laurel Hubbard wouldn't be eligible. Is that another hidden message here? Or are you simply saying, even if we could, we wouldn't? So it begs the question here, right? Like, you have to look at the whole story and the whole picture. Because yes, okay, Laurel Hubbard is eligible. That's phenomenal, first transgender Olympian. But how did she get here, and will others be able to follow? That's the big question. So once we're out of ongoing competitions, it'll be very interesting to see what the IOC does, because then they'll be able to change regulations, and we'll really see what they stand for. Of course, when it comes to transgender athletes, let alone Olympians, there's tons of backlash out there, and really the concern mostly is when it comes to athletic advantage and athletic disadvantage. And the reason this is because a transgender woman, so male transitioning to a female, you find that many argue that they had biological advantages as a male, which continue once they have transitioned, and therefore they should be ineligible to compete against females or cisgender females. And that's really the argument. It's what's the case? Is that fair? Is that unfair? Where should transgender athletes fall? So from my perspective, I am at a position where I believe that we should welcome all, but I believe that it should come with clear regulations. So for instance, a transgender athlete, in my opinion, should be fully transitioned in order to be eligible to compete with that said gender that they associate with. Because then I feel that as much as possible, any possible athletic disadvantages or advantages are limited or eliminated as much as they can be, if that's really going to be your argument. When an individual fully transitions, their hormone levels are changed, and parts of their biology are altered as well, which therefore impacts their athletic performance. So that's my take on it. I'm very, very proud and happy for Laurel Hubbard to be included here. I just hope from this point on that many continue to follow in both respects, on both sides of the gender coin here. But only time will tell here. We'll have to see what the IOC does post-competition. Leave a comment or DM me on Instagram at Interrupting Sports and let me know what your guess is where the IOC will stand. Because we all know, regardless, there's going to be a lot of talk on what happens here, whether they say nothing or whatever they choose to say. So I'm curious to see your thoughts. Now, I just wanted to take a moment here to plug the YouTube channel. So Interrupting Sports has a YouTube channel. Just look up Interrupting Sports Podcast and you'll find every episode there recorded. So for those of you who aren't Spotify or Apple Podcast subscribers, you can also watch us for free on YouTube and listen to every single episode. So just check out Interrupting Sports Podcast on YouTube today. Now, the final topic I wanted to talk about today is talk about Mandy Bujold. Mandy Bujold is a Canadian boxer, and her story is quite incredible because of actually how she ended up competing in the Olympics this year. So Mandy Bujold was a boxer who was actually denied to compete initially, given that she was on maternity leave and she missed the Olympic trials in order to be eligible for the Olympics. So what happened here was pre-pandemic. The Canadian boxer was number 2 in the world, actually, so highly, highly, highly successful and definitely eligible, no doubt. But she got pregnant during that time, so she was unable to qualify for Tokyo since when COVID-19 hit, when she would be able to compete in the qualifying tournaments, those were canceled due to the pandemic. So here, what she did was she didn't stop here. She didn't just, throw in the towel and say, what, it is what it is. She actually appealed to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, CAS. So that's the highest authority that you can go to in terms of legal options. And she actually won. So she was able to argue the fact that, there should be a special circumstance for female athletes who are on maternity leave, because they should be eligible to either compete in the Olympics or qualify to compete, given the pandemic eliminated their chance of the qualifying tournaments. And so she won and she was able to compete. Unfortunately, she was recently just eliminated in the preliminary rounds, but the point isn't her result in the Olympics. The point is the fact that she even got there. And, the story is really interesting because she single-handedly took on the IOC, International Olympic Committee. She wasn't backed by a bunch of athletes who were arguing the same thing. She did have athletes back her up on social media and say, good for you for doing this, we support you, that kind of pat on the back, but nothing in terms of legal affairs. That was all on her own, and she was able to make it and qualify. So I think this one really brings into question equity versus equality. So for those of you who are just unfamiliar with the terms, I just want to make sure we all know what we're talking about here. The difference between equality and equity, because oftentimes they're wrongfully used as synonyms of each other, when in fact they're not. So equality, the word equal is there, right? Everybody is given the same thing, the exact same treatment. Where equity differs is equity isn't about giving everybody the same thing, but giving everybody what's fair and what's due to them. So for example, someone in harsher circumstances may require more assistance than someone who's better off. You still want them to have the same level of care ultimately, but you're going to have to devote some more resources to the individual who's worse off in the beginning. That's the idea of equity versus equality. And so the reason that this is relevant to Mandy Bujold's story is because when you think of female athletes and maternity leave, this is not something that needs to be considered for male athletes. So this is what I mean by the difference between equality and equity, because you shouldn't be treating, in this circumstances, male athletes and female athletes alike. Equality is not relevant here and does not apply when you're talking about maternity leave in terms of being eligible to compete, because men, it's just biological fact that they don't have to go through these circumstances of having to choose between their family and their athletic careers. In this respect, of course, we have single dads or even just parents in general who, of course, have to give everything for their children. But when we're talking about competing, there's a biological disadvantage, of course, when you're pregnant because you're unable to compete. So that's where equity comes in, because we have to understand that rules and regulations have to adapt to these circumstances, particularly for females, to ensure that they're given the same level of opportunity that men are. So that's where equity and equality come into play here with Mandy Bujold. But again, pat on the back and round of applause for her for taking on the IOC and winning, and proud to support a Canadian athlete again in the Tokyo Olympics. Sad to see her eliminated, but it was a long and hard fight on her part. So great job, Mandy Bujold. So as we're nearing the end of this episode, what I wanted to do this week is I want to hear from you guys. We talked about 3 topics today. We talked about the Norway women's beach handball team, who was fined for not playing in bikini bottoms. Instead, they played in shorts. We have Laurel Hubbard's story, the first transgender Olympian. She's a New Zealand weightlifter. And then finally, we talked about Mandy Bujold, who's the Canadian women's boxer who was denied initially to qualify for the Olympics as she was off on maternity leave, and due to the pandemic was unable to qualify in the other qualifying tournaments. So what I want to hear from you guys, and I would love for you guys to DM me on Instagram at Interrupting Sports, or comment when this episode is released on our post. So the first question I would ask you guys is, how do you feel about the Norway's beach handball team protest demonstration of wearing shorts versus bikini bottoms? What is your opinion on that? The second question I would love to ask you guys is, what is your take on transgender participation in the Olympics? I know I mentioned my opinion. I was curious to know what you guys feel as well. And then finally, do you feel that Mandy Bujold should have been eligible to compete? Was that fair to allow her this extra treatment? Do you feel that aligns with equity principles, or do you feel that that's a differential treatment? So again, hit us up at Interrupting Sports on Instagram, and love to hear your thoughts on those 3 topics. All right, guys, that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you for taking the time to tune in. Please show some love to your favorite podcast by following us on Instagram at Interrupting Sports. I'll leave you guys today with a new message. Enjoy the Olympic Games and go Team Canada. Thanks, guys. See you next week.